Good morning. Come on in. This is Grandma Lois. Cynthia of Cynthia Insights always says, and my name is Cynthia. Well, my name is Grandma Lois. So come on in, sit down, find yourself a seat. That kitty cat is at home here. And look, I got a Christmas tree again. Isn't this beautiful? You can just have that right in your living room. I could never afford a tree like that. Or if I could, what work, man? I'm not that on the ball. But there's our kitty cat, and there's our fire keeping us warm in this cold weather. And James got me this hat, and it's fuzzy. It's like furry, and it's cute. So we're going to talk about superstitions this morning that Appalachia has so much of. But before that, I want to share with you some scripture from Colossians, and it was Paul speaking. And he said this, and it was in Colossians 1:21-23. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior, but now he has reconciled you by Christ's physical body through death to present you holy in his sight, without blemish and free from accusation. If you continue in your faith, established and firm, and that's what we want to do not move from the hope held out in the gospel. This is the gospel that you heard and that has been proclaimed to every creature under heaven, and of which I, Paul, have become a servant. And that's what we are, servants. And Paul was one of the first servants to tell about Jesus, and his name was Saul. He said during this time the Colossian church was fallen uh, to bad teaching and empty things, fooling people based on human tradition, but not based on Christ. So he was straightening them out. We got to follow Jesus, and we need to follow the 10 Commandments. Do not kill, steal, rob, do not envy, don't be jealous, and make God number one in your life. So now, this morning I made a little short that I'm going to tell you about some of the superstitions that was in Appalachia. And the first one that I'm going to recall this morning. Now, just remember this. We was living in Smith Holler, sometimes called Gospel Holler. And it had a church down at the end of the street, Pentecostal Church, Assembly of God, started before I was born. But I was 4 and 5 years old when we was living in this little red house up in Smith Holler. And so anyway, I was precocious as a little girl. I've talked a lot, and my mom just was amazed that I was yakety yak yak, and I would talk back. But anyway, she said one day, she said, "Come here a minute, honey." And she threw a broom down across the doorway. And she said, "Step across that." So I stepped across it. Then I turned around and went back. I said, "There." She said, "Oh, you're not a witch." I said, "No, I'm not a witch." She said, "You are not a witch." My own mother. See, because the tale is out in Appalachia that if you couldn't step over a broom and wouldn't step over a broom, that meant you definitely was a witch. And that's how you tested to see if somebody was a witch. And my mom tested me, and I'm not a witch. I'm a servant of the Lord. And now, so I looked up some of the things. Of course, I remember some. Now, if a black cat, James was telling me this morning, he knew a man that if a black cat crossed in front of him wherever he was going, he went and circled around or went completely another direction. So because of the bad luck, if a black cat crossed your path, terrible things could happen. And that he avoided it by going way around. And then another one I used to hear all the time: if you walk under a ladder, bad things will do not walk under a ladder. And I was telling James about that, and he said, "Well, it could happen, bad things, because a lot of people leave a hammer or a bucket of paint sitting on top of the ladder, and if you walk under it, that hammer is liable to hit you in the head and kill you." That's what James said. Well, I don't walk under ladders, that's for sure. So I looked up some on the internet. It said, leave one apple on the tree after harvest to keep the devil away. And people did that kind of stuff. To ward off rheumatism, wear a buckeye in your bra. Now, that's my mother-in-law believed that one. She had a buckeye, and they're for good luck. And she kept one all the time. My mother-in-law, she was very Appalachian down in Tennessee. Buddy's mom, and she didn't wear brassiers, and she wore her hair up in a little knot in the back of her head, just a little knot back, and it was long down her back. But she had bobby pins that she could stick in them and hold it. And then when they went to church and got to shouting, she would shake that out, and her hair would fall around. But anyway, she believed in a lot of that stuff, and Buckeye was one of them. So she carried her money around her neck on her ribbon with a little backer bag. Now, backer bag was what Roland people used to make their own cigarettes. They buy cigarette paper, and they would buy a sack of tobacco, and then you would put your tobacco in that, lick it, and roll it up, and you have your cigarette, and you would smoke it. Well, that's the way her husband smoked. Papa smokes that way because he rolled his own. It was cheaper than buying those that were already rolled. So she carried her a buckeye, and she put her money in that little bag around her neck, and that buckeye, and it kept her safe, she felt like. There was a lot of these. And I remember this one, that it's bad luck to sweep the dirt out the door. Now, when we was little, we did not, and my mom would see to it, you do not sweep the dirt out the door. And we had to sweep nearly every day because my mom never did teach my brothers to wipe their feet or anything like that before they got in the house. And so we swept and mopped often. And we kept down linoleum, which is vinyl rugs that you could buy at the store. And all the hand-me-down stores, or not hand-me-down, but the general stores in town, like Hardinsburg had 2 stores, Halps and another one. And they kept the rolls of linoleum in a roll, and you could get what size you wanted, 10 by 12, 12 by 14, whatever. And you would take it home, and you would heat it up some, let it stay where the heat was till it got soft. And then you would move all the furniture and roll your new linoleum out. And we would mop that linoleum because we had to sweep and mop every day. But Mom kept something handy where we could pick up the dirt and not sweep it out the door. You don't do that because that's bad luck. And we didn't. So, anyhow, if your ears are ringing, it means somebody's talking about you. And if your nose is itching, it's just sure that somebody's going to come see you. And if you drop the dish rag, wow, that is terrible because they'll come. If you're doing dishes and you drop the dish rag accidentally, that means for sure you're going to have company. I remember all those, a lot of them, and I'm reading some of them. If a cricket is killed in the house, it's bad luck. So that's why we catch crickets and throw them out the door. And I didn't realize why we was always catching crickets. But what is bad, if a cricket gets in your house, it gets noisy. And they come in the fall because it's warmer in the house. And I used to hunt them up, but I didn't kill them. I would try to catch them and throw them out the door because that's the way Mom taught us. My mom was a very superstitious person in a lot of ways, in a lot of things. Anyway, let's see. Now, what else we got here? Place an acorn on a windowsill to protect the house from lightning? No, I didn't know that one. But what we used to do is these salesmen would go from house to house selling lightning rods. And you put this rod on top of your house, and they still have them. You can still buy lightning rods. And a wire comes from it, and at the end of it is a string. It runs to a thing you can stick in the ground, and that lightning rod will, and this is true, it will catch the lightning and put it into the ground, and your house will be safe from lightning. And that's a true story. That's not a superstition. Let's see. What else is here? Oh, yeah. If a bird flew into the house, man, you did not kill it or hurt it, because that is a sign of death in the family. And a lot of people believe that. So if a bird accidentally got in your house, you just got it out as safe as you could. And if you could get it out safe, then you was okay. You didn't leave it in the house. Some people covered all the mirrors after a death, or those who look into that mirror will die. I never heard tell of that one. And stop all the clocks in the house when someone dies to prevent another death. I never heard that one either. But I did hear this one. A rocking chair that moves on its own is left rocking without anyone in it is a sign of a spirit being there. Well, that almost makes you believe it, don't it? Because that happens sometimes. Now, a picture falling off the wall is a sign of death, of a spirit or a death. And Floyd was in the hospital and he was real sick. And I was visiting him, and he was really ill. And they said he wasn't going to last. That was number two husband. He wasn't going to last much longer. And so I went to see him, and he had Alzheimer's, and he never spoke anymore after a certain amount of time. He had a big hemorrhage in his brain, so he never spoke again. So he was in the hospital from the nursing home. They sent him, and I went to see him, and I talked to him, and I told him that we had some good times together, and I thanked him for the good times, and I just told him stuff like that. And he had been unconscious, but he opened his eyes and he looked at me, and I could tell he knew who I was when I was telling him all that. You could tell. And so anyway, I went on home, and honey, this is the truth. Where he slept in his bed, me and him slept in the bedroom in this apartment right here. The picture that hung over on the headboard right over our bed had fallen off the wall and was in the bed. And I said, oh, he's gone. And that superstition was in me, but that just told me he's gone. And he was. He was gone. He passed away after I left. He wasn't there much longer, but I didn't stay much long. I told him everything, and I left and came home, and that picture was on the bed. I said, now how could that happen? And then I remembered that things like that happen when people die, that a picture that's hanging on, the nail's still there and everything. The nail didn't come out of the wall or anything, just the picture was on the bed. I saw it myself. Strange things happen in this world, and that is the truth. And that happened. Now, when we used to go to church, when Norman and I and Phyllis was little, out on the farm, there was this man, a Charlie Setzer, and he lived about a mile and a half from us, and he decided to have a revival in his garage. And this doesn't have anything to do with superstition. This tells you what it was like walking in the dark with a lantern to a church, because Mama and Daddy would let us go. I mean, we went over a pasture land, and across the fence we had a step thing, which they had barbed wire fences, and you couldn't hardly get through them. So what they would do is build steps up one side and steps down the other, and we could go across that and go past Carl Smith's farm. That way his house was there. That's when we were kids. Other people lived there later. And then we'd walk on over to Charlie Setzer's, which wasn't far from the Sunday school and Horner's Chapel Church that we went to. They had a little house side of the road and a two-car garage. So he got him some folding chairs, and he knew a policeman in town that wanted to be a preacher, evangelist. So he invited him. Theodosia Dudley was his daughter, and we were friends. And she was she's still alive, and she's a little older than I am, Theodosia. And she says, call me Titty. Who in the world is going to, I always call her Theodosia because that's her name. Her mother would play the piano, and she was gifted. And then her daddy would uh, preach, and he was a policeman in New Albany, and we had a revival, and we would walk over to the. It was exciting for us kids to walk all through them woods. We went through woods in one area as we came out of our farm to Carl Smith's farm, and so we took a shortcut. So anyway, at night when we come home, we would hear this screaming, and we didn't know if it was a screech owl or what it was. But I tell you what, you would start moving fast to get out of there. Maybe Norman knows what that was. I'm going to ask him sometime. He's smarter than I am about stuff like that. But I was afraid it was a mountain lion or something. I didn't know what it was. But we had our lantern, and a lantern does not put out much light when you're walking with a lantern. You light it with a match, and it's got coal oil in it, and you can carry it like hanging like a bucket. Look it up on YouTube. They got them there. I have one or two hanging in my garage right now. So anyway, we had a lot of fun and going to that revival. And Theodosia is still friends. Her sister passed away, I think. Yes, she had a sister, and she was real pretty. And Theodosia and I stayed friends, and we still are. And she's on Facebook, and she watches my YouTube sometimes. And I don't call her Teddy, I call her Theodosia. That's a Bible name. Well, did you know Lois is a Bible name also? And I'm Lois, Grandma Lois. And my mom named me Lois Clarine, and Clarine was a movie star, 1932, which was a mighty good year. I was born in 1933, but Mom, I don't know if she went to the movies. I guess she did, because they did go to movies back then. And that Clarine was a beautiful girl. I looked her up, and it really is true. I don't remember her full name, but there was a movie star named Clarine. And there are other Clarines around. I just haven't met any. So anyway, I'm getting ready to go have my eyes examined to see what he's going to do. And I am real excited about that. So y'all say a prayer for me. And James's secretary is going to drive me over there. And she went and got her eyes fixed. And now she don't wear glasses, and she's about 70. Very active. She's a grandma and a great grandma, and I don't know what all. She's got an active family, and they're so busy. But she works for James three days a week. And I was looking at all this stuff that people, uh, the Appalachian people, and I had heard a lot of them, but some of them I never heard tell. And a lot of things are omens of death or bad luck. If you want to break a friendship, both people should walk off in different sides of a post. That'll do it. So anyhow, I'm going to close it down, and I think I'm going to take a nap before I go over to Louisville, and I got to run get some milk. You know very well I cannot do without milk, and I got milk over at James's house, but we're just real low here, so I'm going to run out to Walmart. I will get in the car and go get me some milk. So I'll talk to you later. God bless you, and walk that path where Jesus would be pleased with you. Love you. Bye bye.